has now agreed terms with Real Madrid. He will leave Liverpool on a free transfer when his contract expires at the end of the season.
Is he entitled to live his life, or does he have to do precisely what some rabid Liverpool fan thinks he should do?
I would have liked him to get some money for him personally.
There was no doubt that he was going to end up at Real Madrid. I think there's only a few clubs around the world that you might be interested in, and Real Madrid will be one of them.
He's not leaving to go to any other team. He's going to Real Madrid.
Do I think he's as good as people make him out to be? I don't think so, and I think he's quite fortunate to be getting a move to Real Madrid. I think he's a very good player.
The Liverpool supporters that are upset, someone they've bought through their system, someone who comes from the same area of them, is deciding to go somewhere else. Then they're hurt by that, right?
Well, then they should grow up.
It's going to be competition for his place.
You could say that the club maybe have been a little bit irresponsible letting him get down to that situation, but when it comes to contracts nowadays and their length of contracts, players now have got all the power, and that's as simple as that.
That is the Lowdown talkSPORT, brought you exclusively from Alex Crook. It's confirming the move that Trent Alexander-Arnold seems to have signed a deal confirming his move to Real Madrid. In that package, we heard a lot of people sort of sympathetic with Trent's decision to leave his boyhood club, but sat opposite me is a man who has absolutely, sided with the Liverpool fans who think that he is a traitor. Rory, Simon Jordan says Liverpool fans that are angry at Trent need to grow up. You don't seem to be in that position.
But Simon Jordan's not a Liverpool fan. You know, and I'm trying to empathise and see it through the lens of being a Liverpool fan. I can only talk about my own experiences with this. When players leave Chelsea, depending on the circumstance, I will often hold them accountable and often consider them to be a traitor and boo them on their return. I've done that for years. I think that Mason Mount behaved disgracefully, calling Manchester United his dream club, sitting in the Manchester United training changing room with his father Tony, saying that it was a dream come true. When Chelsea have lost players over the years, I've always found it to be upsetting, and I think that generally there is a circumstance that needs to be taken into account, but there is quite often an element of Judas-like behaviour from players. And with regard to Trent Alexander-Arnold, there is no doubt that he has behaved in a way that isn't in keeping with the local boy out of Liverpool.
Do you not think there's a much stronger argument that the disdain from Liverpool fans needs to be directed at FSG for allowing this huge period of time whereby Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Trent's contracts have been allowed to run down and allow it to get to a point where Real Madrid, in the grand position of power that they have, can say, don't sign a new contract, just let it run out and we'll give you a big sign-on fee.
No, absolutely.
Do you not think that you need to look at FSG and criticise them rather than for Trent's personal ambition to play for the biggest football club in the world?
No, there is certainly a different conversation to be had. It should never have come to this. Trent Alexander-Arnold should never be able to run down his contract. Somebody who's been at the club since they were a child should never get into a situation where they're going into their final year. So no, there has been negligence and there needs to be a lot of people held accountable for this. It's really poor, and I think there's been a change of ownership and a change of the hierarchy, and that has led to an oversight which has cost the club a fortune. But they're different conversations. Yes, absolutely, you're right. FSG need to have a look at this. It should have never got to the stage where three of the most important players in the team are running down their contract at the same time. That aside, though, Trent Alexander-Arnold has turned his back on the club that made him.
Well, let's hear from another Englishman who also turned his back on his boyhood club, Michael Owen. He told us no one can begrudge Trent and his move.
If he did leave, do you think it's because he doesn't like Liverpool? Or does it, he's done absolutely everything. This is just an opportunity. Do you know what? Part of him will probably think, I wish I didn't have a decision to make, because he probably loses sleep over it. I know I did for about 10 days from knowing the interest and actually making a decision. I didn't sleep for 10 days. I actually hated it. You might think it's a nice problem, but it's almost like it's a horrible problem. You just almost want to be forced into one direction and just get on with your football.
Michael Owen there saying it only took him 10 days to get over leaving his boyhood club.
That's the most pointless person in the world to hear from, by the way. I'm not saying that with any disrespect towards Michael Owen. I think he's an icon, one of the best players this country's produced. But his opinion on this is obviously biased. It's obviously laced with self-interest. And his words here are completely hollow. They are completely irrelevant. There was literally no point in playing that clip.
Rory, I understand that the hurt that Liverpool fans will feel because I know what it feels like to support a club and love a player, particularly one of your own. And Forest have had a great history of developing players, and for a large part of my life, they've all gone on to pastures new because of the state the club has been in. I certainly understand why it's even more difficult for Liverpool fans to fathom this when they find themselves in such a strong position, incredibly successful under Arne Slot, new era, exciting, should have gone further in Europe, but, I really understand the pain. But what I don't understand, for me, Rory, is there seems to be this sort of standard and people getting on their moral high horse and enforcing their view of loyalty over an individual's personal ambition. I don't necessarily think that Trent should be constrained by expectations that other fans have of him. If he wants to go and play for the biggest club in world football, having already achieved more than Steven Gerrard, there's an argument that he's more of a Merseyside hero because he's won far more than Steven Gerrard.
That was a little bit Meghan Markle's version of her truth, like what you said. There isn't a version of loyalty. It's not conforming to somebody else's version of loyalty. There is just a definition of loyalty. So
loyalty, in your perspective, means that in every situation it means you must stay at your boyhood club regardless.
No, there are different avenues to explore here. So, for example, when Michael Owen left, I think that was more palatable and more understandable than when Trent Alexander-Arnold left. When Steve McManaman decided that he needed to leave, of course he needed to leave. That Liverpool team that he left, it was a good team. It was a Spice Boy team. It was a very interesting team. There was great talent in it. It was exciting. I think the Liverpool faithful loved that side. But realistically, they were never better than Man United. They were never going to win the league.
I understand that. The context is totally different.
Steve McManaman had to leave.
Yeah.
Trent Alexander-Arnold, when you were talking about his ambition, he needs to fulfil his personal ambition. Trent Alexander-Arnold can fulfil all of his personal ambition at Liverpool. At Liverpool, they are going to win the league this year. Real Madrid might not. They're not top of the league at the moment. He has this dream to win the Ballon d'Or. He wants to be the first ever right-back to win a Ballon d'Or. Fine. Why can't he win that at Liverpool? You don't need to go to Real Madrid to win a Ballon d'Or. Rodri has just won it at Man City, making sure, by the way, in the process, that Vinicius Jr., the Real Madrid player, the Galactico, didn't win it. So I don't understand why Trent Alexander-Arnold needs to leave Liverpool to fulfil his aspiration. Michael Owen did.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and you're right about the context of when these players have left. What I think maybe I don't understand, Rory, is the sort of idea that his name should be besmirched.
It should be.
When he has achieved so much. I don't know why
it's not about achievement.
Why you can go from love to hate.
It's because that's exactly what it is.
He's represented the club amazingly. He's one of their boyhood heroes. And yes, you can be upset, but burning shirts.
What you're doing
burning
though is
shirts, online hate.
Well, absolutely, that's exactly what it is. It's emotion. The reason why they hate is because they love so much. The reason why they hated Torres when he went to Chelsea is because they adored him. The entire COP was resonating to the sound of that Torres song, game after game after game, because they adored him so much, and then he turned his back on them. So they hate. They love Trent Alexander-Arnold. They called that corner Trent Alexander-Arnold corner. They devoted everything they had to him. And he turned his back. The reason I hate Gus Poyet is because I loved him. The reason I hate Gus Poyet is because I loved him. The reason I have absolutely no time now for Mason Mount is because I loved him. Of course, it's born out of the same thing.
So do you expect Trent Alexander-Arnold to suspend his own personal ambition at the altar of Liverpool?
No,
loyalty to
I
Liverpool?
absolutely don't expect him to suspend any personal ambition. I believe that he can fulfil every single aspect of his personal ambition staying at Liverpool. I think he can become...
So what's going through his mind then? Why do you think he has done
money,
it
glamour, Jude Bellingham...
But you're telling me that if he sat round the table with FSG, he couldn't be demanding as much money that he's reportedly 220 grand a week?
Playing for Real Madrid, his brand increases. His entire just the wherewithal around him becomes bigger. He becomes a Galactico. He will be wealthier going to Madrid. I think he likes the idea of going to Real Madrid. But what he's turning his back on is legacy. What he's turning his back on is becoming one of the greatest players who have ever played for Liverpool. What he's turning his back on is the Liverpool captain's armband. He would have been the next man at Liverpool. Yeah. And do you know what I hold in massive regard, Max? I love the idea of being a one-club man. I think it's a dying art. But do you know why we all love Paolo Maldini? The reason why Maldini is because he did it all in one shirt. I think that the legendary status of Paul Scholes is amplified by the fact that he did it all at one club. I think Ryan Giggs, I don't know why, but Ryan Giggs' footballing legacy has been massively impaired of late. But he was amazed 2 decades at one club, winning league after league after league. Jamie Carragher, all at one club. Trent Alexander-Arnold could have become a one-club man in the way that Maldini is. He could have surpassed Jamie Carragher's tally, 750-odd games in the Premier League era. He could have surpassed that. So he could have become the record Premier League appearance holder for his boyhood club. He's heir to the throne of the captaincy. He's turned down the captaincy. He's turned down the one-club man. He's turned down the record appearances. He's turned down the potential, of being top 10 Liverpool players of all time. You know what that could mean? That could actually mean for the local lad, that could end up translating with the trophies that he's won. The Anfield Road end becomes the Trent Alexander-Arnold end. That's what it could be. And he's turned it down for what? To become a forgotten Galactico. That's effectively what it is. Think better players than Trent Alexander-Arnold have gone over there and made a pig's ear of it.
From a purely football perspective, how do you think it's just a foregone conclusion that Trent Alexander-Arnold walks into the Madrid side?
No.
There's been lots of criticism around the quality of his defending.
Yeah.
There's been lots, he's going into a squad with Dani Carvajal there, who's already a Madrid legend. And do you think that is he as expendable or is he more expendable than maybe people say he is?
Yeah, I don't think if I were a Liverpool fan, I would be heartbroken at the betrayal. I wouldn't be particularly heartbroken at the gap in the team. I don't rate him as highly as everyone else. I think he's massively overrated. I think people celebrate things from him that we see fairly regularly for, that crossfield pass. I was watching John Terry do that with his weaker foot, game after game at Stamford Bridge. I've seen this before. When he's been deployed as a midfielder, he's average at best. I don't really get it. It's cost Liverpool a European Cup in Paris. There's no doubt about that. Vinicius Jr., the only man on the planet who didn't know where Vinicius Jr. was the geezer marking him, Trent Alexander-Arnold. So no, I think there are failings in his game massively. We could have a conversation about his brilliance as well, don't get me wrong. And I'm sure that he'll spray that crossfield pass to Mbappe and there'll be moments that we see on Twitter. But Real Madrid fan, if they think that their defence is going to be elevated with the arrival of Trent Alexander-Arnold, they're going to be in for a real shock. And far better players that outweigh his ability by 10, have gone to Real Madrid and it not really works out for them. Eden Hazard, for example, Arjen Robben, for example. It's not always a guarantee.
Always rosy.
No.
And that shirt weighs heavy on players.
Heavy.
And he doesn't have the grace of being a homegrown player that's adored by the fans, that's given that.
Do you know the other thing which I think is important to note as well? If Trent Alexander-Arnold really wanted this move and wanted the furtherance of Liverpool to be high on the agenda, you know what he could have done? He could have signed a contract with a break clause, signed a contract with a release clause.
This is where I do really understand the frustration. I'm trying to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here.
Why not
I don't really know where I sit with it, but
why not sign a contract 6 months ago? Sign a contract 6 months ago with a release clause of 60 million quid, and then everyone's a winner. I think Kaká did that. When Kaká went to Real Madrid from AC Milan, he signed a contract with a break clause, knowing that he was going to go to Real Madrid, just making sure that AC Milan got the money that they deserved, effectively.
Now, elsewhere in and around this sort of the concerns about a mass exodus at Liverpool, talkSPORT does understand that Mo Salah's preference is to stay in Europe. Surely, Rory, that means that he's destined to stay at Anfield, or where else could he possibly go? Can you see him playing for another club in Europe?
I believe that Mohamed Salah will play for Liverpool next season. I think his season has been so good, and people are quite cruel, aren't they? And because he hasn't had a great time of it over the last 6 weeks, they forget quite how brilliant he has been this season. There is no way that Liverpool can really afford to let him leave. If they do lose him, they need to replace him, and he's irreplaceable.
How would you rank Salah, Virgil van Dijk and Trent in terms of how important they are to Arne Slot?
I think it goes in the order that you just said them, 3-2-1. So the one that you let go, if one has to leave, it's Trent Alexander-Arnold by a landslide, an absolute landslide. Trent Alexander-Arnold leaving almost doesn't matter. It's totally fine. Virgil van Dijk leaving is a bit of a disaster, and Mohamed Salah leaving is a catastrophe. In that order,
I think Arne Slot would rank it Van Dijk, Salah, Trent, because it was just a couple of weeks ago.
Trent as the
as Trent is
the least. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I think that Slot would put Virgil van Dijk as the most important to that. He said a couple of weeks ago, just before the international break, he was asked about the contract situation, and he said all I care about is that Virgil van Dijk stays.
See, I would have agreed with you I would have said, if we were having this conversation pre-season, I would have said that Van Dijk, everything that they need to be, everything that Liverpool want to do, everything they want to build upon will be built on the foundation that is Virgil van Dijk's quads. But I think people are forgetting what Mohamed Salah was doing for like the first 25 games of the season.
Yeah, and I think the age stuff is over-exaggerated, the way that players look after themselves, and there is no doubt, there is no question over Mohamed Salah's professionalism and the way he looks after himself.
But also, those first 25 games, when the goals and the assists and the vision and... Like, there isn't another player in the world that's doing that at the moment, or at the time. I know it's gone off the boil a bit, but you cannot lose that from your team. Like, there are others. I know what Virgil van Dijk is. I know how important he is. But I would say that the only irreplaceable is Mohamed Salah, because the drop-off is so severe. If you drop off from Virgil van Dijk, don't get me wrong, you're dropping off the edge of a cliff. But it's still, what is it? Kwanzaa Konate.
But I also think the market of centre-backs in Europe is much easier to pick from and to rebuild from. Not that there's you can. I don't think that.
No, there isn't another Van Dijk, but there are other centre-halves. There is no Mohamed Salah. Yeah, there is just no Mohamed Salah.
This story, I guess, is the sort of gift that keeps on giving. I'm sure we'll be talking about it as it officially is confirmed, and of course we'll be talking more and more about what happens with Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk, as we've just described. Huge for Liverpool to keep both of those players. But you're listening to The Social on talkSPORT 2. Next up, we're going to check in with William Hill.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.